Hello, welcome to Pension 10 with me, David Brooks, on my own this week. I was away last week, so thank you to Kelly and Adam for holding the fort for me. The very first Pensions in 10 I haven't done in about 120 odd episodes, whatever it is. I keep losing count. So thanks to them for stepping in while I was on holiday. More on that on the third story today. But I'm back on my own, Easter holidays and things, so tracking down colleagues to do this is a bit tricky, so thought I'd go alone today. But this week, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Pensions Regulator's guidance on Section 37 remedial action that's required. We also talk about thoughts from the FCA on paternalism and simplified advice. And finally, we have a little look at Iceland and pensions. Okay, first up, the Pensions Regulator has provided some guidance around Section 37, so the Virgin Media case, which I'm sure most listeners will be aware of. So a quick reminder, we had some FRC guidance on this a few months ago, which was very helpful and very pragmatic. And it's good news that the guidance from the regulator on this is in a similar vein, so similarly very pragmatic. Of course, the regulator is right to be saying something to add to this, and trustees should be looking at this to ensure what they're doing is in accordance with this very brief guidance, has to be said, quite brief guidance. And so basically what the regulator is saying is sort of summarising the power that will be in the bill. So the pensions bill talks about that remediable work and what needs to be done to either correct the deed that may or that may not have that Section 37 certificate with it. So the regulators are talking through some of that process that trustees will need to go through, taking legal advice, which it says is pretty much mandatory to do around this, taking actuarial advice then if you need it, and liaising with your administrators potentially if you needed to. But it's talking around, how much detail do you need to go into? So it's suggesting that the trustees don't need to go into exhaustive searches to look for things where there's enough evidence around for the actuary to be able to take this remedial work now. So giving clear instructions to the actuary, which bits are you wanting the actuary to certify now. They're very clear as well that there's this quite broad deadline. There's nothing needs to be done immediately, but be cognizant of where your pension scheme is going, what the strategy for the scheme is over the medium term. If you're looking to do a risk transfer in the foreseeable future, then getting this done sooner rather than later perhaps is better. But again, there's no hard and fast rules, which is good to see. Also important to make sure that the sponsor is aware of what you're doing, what sort of work you're doing, when it's likely to be finished, and what the outcome of that is going to be, because if there's any funding implication to what can be done, the sponsor will need to know this. There's no need to advise the regulator. You can just crack on with this, in accordance with your own strategy and your own decision making, and then get this through. So I think it's really helpful guidance from the regulator, again, building on the FRC work from previously. You can actually start the work now as well. You don't have to wait for the bill to get royal assent before starting. You can't finish it. You can't actually complete the process until that bill becomes an act. And we're not expecting that bill to sit around for a while. That is due to become an act perhaps in the next couple of weeks, as the government as reported last week, I mentioned the government are working with the Lords to get various amendments through. So once that's finalised, this will come through. But obviously the bigger picture things around salary sacrifice and the mandation power, getting all the headlines, this is kind of rumbling along. And when that finishes, then this will finish it as well. So yeah, helpful stuff, and well worth taking a look at. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about a couple of things from the FCA side of the world. So Nikhil Ratty was talking to a summit. I think it was JP Morgan, got my notes there, but I think it was a JP Morgan speech he was given. That's detail. But he was talking about an interesting area around paternalism and the way he's looking to the future to how pensions are going to be interacted with by people. Well, he called it a move beyond simple paternalism. So we're going to have people with dashboards and people with lots of DC pots, this kind of thing we've talked about on Pensions 10 and other things before around the way people are going to interact with their pensions is going to change in the future. The last 10 years or so, we've had lots of people coming to retirement with DC pots, potentially with DB, but the DC pot is perhaps a smaller bit, and so less emphasis on what they do with it, and less of a worry, I suppose, from a policy regulator perspective. But I think the comments from Nikhil here are talking very much about how people can be supported to make choices. I think a lot of what we're hearing about, so I suppose in the world I come from, which is sort of trust-based pensions, and I think the paternalism there tends to be a lot stronger. People who are running those schemes want people to be supported, but perhaps there's an expectation that people won't be able to support themselves, and so there's a stronger paternalism sort of expectation I think in our world, in the trust-based world, but from the consumers, the people going through in the contract-based world, it always feels a little bit different, and I think there's an expectation that people will take some personal responsibility and take some choices that are right for them, and I think that's the sort of direction that the FCA are coming from this, and looking at how they can provide a framework where people can make choices that are right for them, and construct their retirement income in a way that's right for them. There's a phrase that's sort of almost like not infantilizing people through default pathways, and I think that's the direction so we're going to a little bit in trust-based world. In the DC world, we're talking about default retirement pathways now, but the FCA seems to be talking much more about creating frameworks that people can help themselves. And that's really interesting. I think it's something that the trustees, especially with trustees of DC schemes, should be thinking about, and perhaps bridging those two gaps and bringing those sorts of worlds together and trying to create a space where, while the default option is there, it is very much the default, and perhaps the default for the minority rather than the majority. I think that's probably where the FCA are coming from. And linked to that, the FCA last week issued some more. Issued a consultation on the simplified advice rules. So this is around trying to create a framework for an easier way for people to access advice. It's always been this problem with people coming to retirement and seeing the cost of advice prohibitive, or just not wanting to engage with it, or not understanding how to what degree they can frame that advice. So this is consultation that's again linked to the targeted support stuff that's happening in the DC space to allow trustees and schemes to contact members at various points during their life cycle in the pension scheme, and perhaps at the end leading them to some simplified advice, which can be simplified set of rules. Because the FCA rules can be quite onerous on advisors, and there's a lot of risk giving advice to somebody, and so these things do tend to become quite behemoth like reports and things. So they're trying to create this sort of very much a simplified advice journey for people to go down and get any recommendation they need at that point, and it kind of turn it into a little bit more of a transactional sort of arrangement as you go in. Someone says, well, I've got 8 pots, I've got this over here, and over here, and over here. What am I going to do? Do I consolidate? Do I take an income from one and use that one for take a lump sum and all this sort of stuff? You can imagine with dashboards and things like this is going to be things that people are going to be thinking about a lot. And if you have these sorts of simplified systems at the end, then perhaps that will actually be helpful to push people, if not reconfirm what they were thinking. I was thinking I might take an annuity from that one because it's got a guaranteed annuity rate, but I was thinking about, taking that and going on a cruise, or paying off the mortgage, or buying a car, or whatever they needed to do. And then this is my money I'm going to be living off for the next few years, and then the annuity will kick in, then my state pension will come on, all that sort of stuff. So interesting. Nicole's comments around paternalism. I think it's an interesting framing, an interesting angle that he took, but I can understand the perspective that he's coming from, but also the simplified advice stuff is coming through as well. And trustees involved with DC schemes should be aware of this to make sure that they're signposting their members to this when this comes through. So definitely take a look at that consultation. Okay, and the final story I want to touch on, because the reason why I wasn't around on Pensions 10 last week is because I was in Iceland, having a little break in Iceland, and I think it's probably safe to say I fell in love with the place. I think it's probably one of the nicest places I've ever been. But we went on a little walking tour around Reykjavik, which is a lovely, beautiful little city. And as you do, you get talking to the guide about equal pay and gender rights. Just one of the things that crops up in conversations quite regularly for me. And it made me thinking, they were talking about how in Iceland they had an Equal Pay Act, and that requires employers to certify that they're paying genders in the same roles equally, and these kind of things. So quite a powerful bit of legislation, and that seems to have been pretty effective. And it got me thinking about their pension system. I did a bit of Googling and following up the conversation with the guide, Martin, who was very funny, very nice guy. And I found out that Iceland's pensions gap or gender pension gap is around 5%, so one of the smallest in Europe. So it got me thinking. So I did a little bit more digging as why that reason would be, and I was thinking about pensions as I do pretty much too much. But there's a lot of the focus is in pensions talking about Australia and how that model is fantastic, and Canada and how that model is fantastic. And I do sometimes think we ignore the Nordics. They do get mentioned every now and again, but having a gender pensions gap of 5%, when in the UK it's 35%, I think it warrants a little pause to think around why is Iceland so good. So one of the reasons is they have a state pension system that is broadly trying to equalise income between genders. It's not based on contributions as much as our system. One of the biggest ones, and pensions, we'll come into this a little bit later on again, but one of the big issues around the gender pensions gap is having a labour market that doesn't punish motherhood. And Iceland have created a labour market system that doesn't punish that motherhood gap. So when a woman has a child, takes time out of work to look after the baby, so they've got shared parental leave, so 6 months for each parent, and the use it or lose it system. So they tend to use it over there, and with an 80% income replacement. So that's excellent. And they've got lots of childcare support. So basically what happens is it's a lot easier for the women to get back to work and start earning again. But also their pension system is also geared up that there is virtually no break in pension contributions during that period as well. So people get back to work quicker, and that break, the contributions, the earning they have in their pension continues, which is excellent as well. So yeah, I think that is one of the key things that they do incredibly well, is that they don't have this motherhood penalty, as you could phrase it. So when people go out to care for children, that they're not punished for being out of the system for so long. So yeah, Iceland has a system that equalises lifetime outcomes by design, whilst the UK system still isn't quite as good at doing that. And I think as well, the size of their state pension is generally a lot larger. And so there's a great reliance in the UK, especially on having a relatively small state pension, but with a larger reliance on working pensions, so workplace pensions that we sort of run. So that balance is the one that Iceland has done so well. So not only is Iceland one of the most amazing countries to go visit, and I urge you to do so. You might need to take out an extension to your mortgage because it's not cheap. Goodness me, it is not cheap. But seeing the Northern Lights, seeing some fantastic waterfalls and glaciers, 2 hours away on a plane, it's pretty special. So yeah, we could learn from Iceland's pensions and labour systems, as well as just enjoying the scenery. They also do CDC, and I was going to go and visit a CDC provider. They seem to have CDC. I'm not quite 100% sure, but I think they've got sort of localised CDC arrangements as well. So Iceland perhaps should be seen as a bit more of an example for pensions for us. So I might have to go back and visit again. Okay, thanks for listening and joining me this week for the latest Pensions in 10. I think we've got Easter holidays coming up. I don't know where we are. So who knows what we'll do for the next Pensions in 10. But do keep listening. And if you're seeing this on LinkedIn, do please give me a like and a share if you can. That'd be excellent. And if you're wanting to get these in your inbox, then you can go to our website, broadstone.co.uk/pensions in 10. It's probably something like that. I can't remember. And you can subscribe, and these will drop in your inbox on a Wednesday. These are geared up towards trustees and those that sometimes lose track of all the things that are going on in pensions, and hopefully worthwhile 10 minutes of your time to have playing in the background. So do please consider subscribing and getting these in your inbox. And I'll see you next time.